Hey everybody, Michael Noland here with a bit of an addendum video to my last one where I actually revealed my top 5 favorite rock guitarists of all time. You know, what I thought I would do in this video today is to bring up specific solos that truly impressed me to begin with, because these solos, I think they'll impress you as well. Now what I want to do is start off with Ritchie Blackmore in this video. And the cut that I have in mind is not so much his best guitar work, it's how he shares the field with Jon Lord. Jon Lord, my favorite keyboard player in rock and roll, bar none. And that, of course, is the wonderful Highway Star. Now, Ritchie plays some amazing guitar in this, but what really impressed me about this cut was how he shared the limelight, really not just on this cut, but on many of Deep Purple's best cuts. I feel that this is my favorite cut off of the Machine Head album, an album that is already chock full of rock classics. Next up, Jimi Hendrix, and of course I'm going to pick a cut off of one of my favorite albums of all time, Electric Ladyland. And of course I'm talking about the cut Still Raining, Still Dreaming. Now I know a lot of people would choose other cuts that are more flamboyant, but let me explain to you why I particularly like this cut. First of all, this is one of his most psychedelic songs that I can think of. And it has the musings of someone who is looking out the window and all of a sudden they realize it's still raining. And why is the person still dreaming? Probably because he's higher than a kite. But it's on this cut that Jimi Hendrix actually makes his guitar talk. When you listen to this cut, listen to the guitar work. It's on Jimmy's solo guitar work on this song that the guitar appears to actually be carrying on a conversation with Jimmy himself. I love this approach to guitar playing, and I think it was a real forward movement in rock. Now, as I brought up in my last video, right around the time that Led Zeppelin showed up on the scenes, I discussed how the other two Yardbird guitarists seemed to be still treading ground at this point. But what magnificent ground Jeff Beck was covering with the Jeff Beck Group. When I first heard Going Down, I couldn't believe my ears. I couldn't believe a guitarist could play like that. The song starts off with a very soft, bluesy piano intro isolated on the left-hand side of the stereo spectrum. But within seconds, the song belongs totally to Jeff, and he takes no prisoners. This is by far my favorite Jeff Beck solo, and it shows him at his very best. Now, Jeff Beck, of course, in the future would go on to explore more jazz elements in his guitar playing, which of course would culminate with Blow by Blow and Wired. And of course, those are two of his most successful albums, but I love them. Now, of course, that brings me to Eric Clapton, my number 2 favorite guitarist of all time. And what solo do I choose here? Ironically, I'm going to choose a solo that is not a solo he played on one of his own projects. I know, you can just feel this one coming, right? And of course, that's his magnificent solo on George Harrison's While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Now, why have I chosen this solo? It's not necessarily one of his hardest solos. It's not even a solo that shows him as a virtuoso, although it's a fine solo. Here's why I choose this solo, and it's because of the emotion that this solo evokes and how those emotions align perfectly with George Harrison's lyrics. This is what makes Eric Clapton such a great guitarist. Riffs, he can play them all day long. And as I've said, he seems to get better and better with age. He's the one rock guitarist that seems to be better today than he was back in his heyday. And like Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton is as good on the acoustic guitar as he is on the electric. Okay, so that leads me to Jimmy Page, my favorite guitarist of all time. And I'll tell you something, we don't have to look very far into Led Zeppelin's repertoire to find a solo to perfectly represent this man's great talent. Led Zeppelin 1, first cut, communication breakdown. Now, as I've said before, I'm a singer-songwriter, but I spent my early days before I realized that my talents lied elsewhere, trying to emulate great guitar solos. And there's so much that can be said about this solo. His pull-off, bringing it back to the root note, climbing up the fret, back to the root note, back up to the fret, another pull-off, climbing. I love this. Not only is this a difficult riff to achieve, but the speed and the chosen notes of this solo that Jimmy Page accomplishes, first track, first album, right off the bat, is so impressive, I don't have to even search further for more impressive solos. They don't get more impressive. They might get more mature, but he's impressive right from the very first Led Zeppelin cut. So there's my top 5 favorite guitarists, and there are 5 examples of wonderful solos that they have provided. Now, I know those are only my thoughts. What I want is to hear from the viewers. What solos would you choose from these 5 guitarists that best represents their capabilities both as a lead guitarist and as a compositional guitarist? You know, we haven't talked much about that, but there is a compositional element to my favorite guitar players. My favorite guitar players are the ones that choose melody as well as riffing and accomplish something that is a blend between the two different styles. But I thought I'd go ahead and shoot this video and get that out of the way, because I don't feel in my last video that I gave a good example as to why these 5 guitarists ranked so highly on my own list of favorite rock guitarists. Okay, so that about covers it for this video. I just wanted to give a further explanation as to why I have chose these 5 guitarists as my top favorite rock guitarists of all times. And of course, it's at this point you may see some names coming up in front of me, and that's because I always use this portion of the video to give shout outs to any new subscribers. Boy, in the last couple of weeks, the channel has really taken off, and we've always been grateful for the actual views that we get. For a channel our size, actual views are through the roof, and I'm very grateful, of course. But it's been in the last couple of weeks that subscribership has really picked up. So if you see these names here, it is with gratitude that I supply them. So as you see these names appear in front of you, I just want to say thank you so much for joining the tribe. Now, it's at this point I want to bring out something. Have you ever heard the term, I just gotta find my tribe, man? Well, that's what this whole channel is about. It's not you joining my tribe, it's me finding my tribe. And with each and every new subscriber, my tribe gets a little bit larger, and I want to thank every single one of you for your support. Now, besides my upcoming video on comparing Rubber Soul with Revolver, I'm also putting together my next video on Led Zeppelin, where we're going to explore their very first album. You know, this album came out of the gate and took everybody by surprise. Critics were confused, fans weren't. And specifically, the fans in America seemed to pick up on Led Zeppelin before just about anybody. Of course, this has to do with the fact that they were touring America constantly. And as you know, I rank this album quite high. It's my second favorite Led Zeppelin album of all time. And of course, that video will cover the different aspects of the album Led Zeppelin. Now, of course, as I brought up in my last video, we're going to be covering some other Olympian level bands. Only one, which is Jethro Tull, and of course, that video's coming up soon. But you know, we'll be covering other bands besides just Jethro Tull. I gave you an indication we'd be covering the Police. Now, it's interesting, the Police don't really fit into the classic rock sense in that they were a band from the 60s and 70s. Yes, their first couple of albums were in the late 70s, but really, most people view this as an 80s band. I don't give a damn. They're still one of the best classic rock bands ever, as far as I'm concerned. And although their album output is limited, you've got to understand, they were only on the world stage as an intact band for for a very short time. They produced almost an album a year, and by the time the 80s rolled down, artists were already backing away from producing an album a year. In fact, it's the 80s where we start to see albums being released every 3 years, every 4 years, every 5 years, and you all know what I think about releasing albums that far apart. I think it's been totally bad for the music industry, and that's why music from the 60s and 70s are outselling current bands and current artists. The bands we'll be covering were first of all songwriters, second of all artists who saw each and every release as an extension and exploration of their musical talents as well as their songwriting capabilities. Okay, so that about covers it for the video today. I'm Mike Noland, and we'll see you in the next video.